Hello and welcome. I'm Velin Hawkins, your host, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Health, Wisdom, and Wealth Show. Today, our esteemed guest is Dr. Marla Freedman, and we're going to be talking about something that I notice, and I'm sure that many of us notice, and that is our waistlines. When your waistline is expanding, if you think about it immediately because those jeans are a little too tight, or you got to move the belt a notch, you're thinking about what's happening with my waistline. Well, your waistline actually tells you a few things. And today we're going to talk about some of that. And not only what it's telling you, but some of the things you can do to respond to that conversation. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Marla Freeman. Not only is she an amazing woman, she is a PhD in psychology. She's a New York State licensed and nationally certified in clinical mental health counseling with over 30 years in practice. She's a certified nutritionist and associate of the Viktor Frankl Institute for Meaning-Centered Therapy, a certified trauma professional trained in EMDR, and an advanced fellow and board certified anti-aging, regenerative, and functional medicine practitioner. She holds a certification from the Institute of Functional Medicine in applying functional medicine in clinical practice. And Dr. Freeman offers individual, couples, and group therapy. She's located in New York area, and I love her because she is doing the next level work through her business. We all know that what the pandemic has shown us is that we are going to have to do life a little differently. Everything from the way that we show up, including our waistlines and our mental health. And today we're going to talk about a lot of that. And right now, I just want to say, welcome, Dr. Marla. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful and honored to be here and love talking to you always.
Same here. It seems that whenever we connect, there's just so much to talk about. And in this dynamic of health and wellness, it's pretty interesting because one of the things that I've come into recently is my vegan journey. I've been on a whole food plant-based journey for years now, and gosh, I'm almost 5 years now. But the vegan space has been new to me with this whole compassion for self, compassion for others. But little did I really connect compassion to even looking at my waistline. So as we're getting started, I want to just ask you, how did you get into this work on this journey? How long have you been plant-based? How's the vegan fit in? Just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Okay, I'd be glad to. It's so nice to be asked that because it's a very special, meaningful thing for each person as they choose this or find this. So for me, it actually started pretty early on. And I was during college, undergraduate, I was getting very interested in health and nutrition. Even though at the time I was studying early childhood education. And actually my first job out of college was working in a daycare center in the South Bronx with 3- and 4-year-old precious little beings. And it was a beautiful time. And I didn't know, though, that I was then going to change my career. Because sometimes it takes time till we find exactly what our passion and purpose is, even though I loved what I was doing. And when I think of those children, one thing I think of is all children's nutrition is beginning of the story and what children learned from all of the adults. So I was reading books on spirituality, Indian spirituality, and I was studying yoga in college. And I came across this term in one of the books, which is the term AHIMSA. And I fell in love with that term. And AHIMSA means nonviolence on the most obvious levels. Of course, we know about nonviolence, but this went into, and I think of it as a much deeper level of nonviolence in terms of how we treat ourselves, how we feed ourselves, how we talk to ourselves in our own mind. And as a longtime therapist, that's something that comes up all the time. How are people really feeling about themselves? How are they treating themselves? So I fell in love with this word ahimsa, and it started me thinking very much about and vegetarianism in these books. And I was feeling very affected by that and thinking about, rethinking about, eating and health. And I was reading all these books on nutrition as well. And then I saw some student friends of mine made short movies. They were film students. And one of them made a film of a slaughterhouse. And I saw that. And that knocked me to my knees. That impacted me. And then I was thinking about, ahimsa and everything I was studying at the time about nonviolence and compassion and thinking about these animals and what we're putting in our body and how we've all been taught certain things and indoctrinated in different ways. So it's a deep thing what we're taught at the beginning. So I then got to the point where I was now graduated. I was at a farm with 84-year-old children on an outing at my first job in the South Bronx. And we were standing in a field of cows. We were standing with cows in this beautiful field, and we're right next to them. And they were so beautiful and benign and had these beautiful big brown eyes, gentle energy coming from their eyes. And I'm standing there staring in their eyes. And from everything that was, I feel like being sent to me, or I was being made aware of from all the teachings that I was looking at, and ahimsa. And I knew that day I needed to become first vegetarian and figure that out. And I was reading and studying and learning, and I stumbled onto it. I didn't know what, I was doing at first exactly. But then it progressed and I never went back to it. And I became further and further on the path. I then became fully vegan, which has been a very long time now. I would say over 30 years. I kind of lost count because it's so part of me. And then becoming whole food, plant-based, no oil, healthy fats, but no oil, which also is a whole other level, whole food, plant-based, of another whole level of pure eating. And I guess one thing I just want to say about that journey is that I feel it's such a gift in my life from so many levels, spiritually, health-wise, inspirational-wise, and peace inside, because I'm at peace with, it's like being connected and feeling in tune with what your body and soul and mind are saying, because many people are in conflict over this. Many people feel for this, but they feel conflicted. And I have tremendous feeling for that and compassion for that. And I help people with that. But in terms of my journey, so I then went back to school after a number of years because I realized that I very much loved the education piece, but I saw such a need for healing in the psychology field. And it was so much like my nature. So I went back to school and then started getting the degrees in psychology and counseling. I also then down the road became a nutritionist and studied functional medicine. And I taught myself to integrate all of this because we are all of that. And so if people come for therapy and they're not feeling well and they're have poor self-care, it affects their anxiety, depression, mood, how their relationships are. And I'm actually also a certified relationship therapist. And I see people who are coming for their relationship help and they're not feeling well. And it's such a major part of how we're feeling physically and emotionally and mentally affects our relationship and our relationship with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So one other point about that is many people have trouble getting along with other people. They have bigger problems getting along with themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but people don't usually talk about that. And there's a lot of critical inner talk that people are in struggle about. So I'm very honored to be someone that people speak to me about how they're speaking to themselves in their own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the healing really begins.
Mm-hmm. What a journey. I love it. And I so appreciate you sharing it because, there are a lot of us on the outside or new in this space of, and in particular, looking at food and lifestyle as medicine. And we see people and we have these preconceived ideas sometimes about how, the journey might have been for them. And you hit a very critical point in that we each have our own journey to take, and it will be unique to us. And I think that's something that a lot of people, it's a light bulb moment when they think about, oh, this is my journey and I'm on this journey to do it my way. And but I think it's important to see how others have taken that journey. Some people can go vegetarian or vegan or whole food plant-based vegan overnight, where others really have this chemical system within the body that actually has to go through a process of change. And we can sometimes be hard on ourselves and thus add to the negative self-talk. But the thing that I want to kind of hone in on right at the moment is in this self-talk space. We get to the point where, we've gone through the pandemic, we're on the other side for the most part, and we're looking at the changes that have occurred. Men, women, children, and some of those changes are readily seen in the outer perspective, right? We've now got a waistline when we didn't used to have a waistline, or we've got a bigger waistline, or we've got even more than a waistline. But I know that there are things that our body can tell us if we understand how to hear it. And if we're looking at even just this change in the waistline, what are some of the things that our body might be telling us?
Okay, that's a very interesting way of, presenting that. And, I think that I love the title that, you wrote about the waistline and what you're bringing up right now, because it is so from metaphysical, spiritual, emotional, nutritional, and medical. Like it really is, it's the center of our body. It's right in the middle of our body. And one thing I've seen as a therapist, longtime therapist and nutritionist, is that people are suffering over this. and they're curious and they want to know, why do they have this? What is causing that? And they struggle with themselves. And very often, as you said, very critically so. It's like, it's a mystery to many people. And a lot of people put themselves through so much with extreme dieting, and it's like punishing themselves rather than what really is needed is healing themselves. And I think that one of the things, of course, that contribute to it is the sad American diet, highly processed food, high sugar, high fructose food, deep fried food, farm raised, just all the processed and unhealthy food that our bodies really are trying so hard to assimilate all these things, but we pay a deep price for it. But a very important point, I think, is how do we have peace? How do we find peace with ourselves, with our body, mind, and spirit, and our eating? To me, the beauty is, the goal is eating a plentiful, delicious, attractive diet, not being on a diet, but a lifestyle, where there is food available so that it's deeply satisfying and enjoyable, where there's no deprivation, which also keeps us lean, all in one side of the equation. It's not like, oh, I need something, I have to go to this other place to get something that someone knows they're not going to feel well after. But they, at the moment, they really need something. They want something satisfying and that tastes wonderful. And sometimes it is stress eating, sometimes it's compulsive eating, emotional eating. But it's a need to feel comforted and satisfied. And it's interesting how our chemistry entwines with our mind, and then people have different cravings and things like that, which also is set off by eating all the processed food. So what I've learned over a long time in helping people and working on this myself is creating beautiful food that's nourishing and volume eating. So it's like, picture eating big volumes of food that you totally enjoy, and you're lean from the way you're eating. And that's honestly what I find in plant-based, whole food plant-based, and why I mention no oil, because that's very interesting, I think, topic in itself. And it contributes to waistline, let's say, larger than people want their waistline to be. And, I think also, I think of the body, like each one of us, as we were saying, is on our own unique journey and path. And everyone has to decide for themselves how they want their body to be, what is right for them. And it's their deep choice of how they can love and accept what is for them and what they want to create for themselves. As I said before, that a lot of people are in conflict with that. People want to feel satisfied and nourished, and that they're just comfortable, but they don't like the result that it's creating eating that way. Then they're on the battle. They're in that battle. So learning this way of eating has been very interesting. So here, all these years I've been doing this. And when I learned about really eliminating oil, and we've all been taught from the beginning, we see oil being used in all different ways, and all kinds of oils and foods. Many of them are really very unhealthy. But I noticed something when I eliminated oil, and I humbly say that I didn't have, like, let's say, from eating this way for so long, because I eat the way I do, I didn't have weight around the middle, However, my waistline got smaller. And I noticed that. And I noticed it when I started inviting people to experiment with that in their own life. So I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying not eating healthy fats, because there are very beautiful whole food fats that enhance our health depending on our health situation, what of course doctors are recommending. Because some people, like for example with heart disease, need to be very mindful and have direction from their, let's say, plant-based doctor, or path that they're on. But there are healthy fats that we can have, and they're whole foods, they're not processed, because oil is processed. And many people are sauteing in oil, they're pouring it on salads, they're putting it on vegetables. They don't realize how much, because it's like in the column in their mind of, well, it's healthy. But it's actually pure fat that's processed, and it does change what happens with how our waistline is. So I think that is very intriguing, and I know it to be true because I've seen it in many people that I've taught this to, and it's in there's a lot of videos about this in the plant-based whole food, plant-based movement to learn about this. But going back to our waistline, so it's also a way that people judge themselves. They're mean to themselves. They're frustrated. They're sad. There's a whole emotional piece to that. So that needs healing. Like, how do we talk to ourselves inside about our weight, even if we're not happy at the moment? With that is finding out what we can do to heal and balance ourselves in a different way. And I guess it brings up one other very important topic, which is, what do we believe? Because we live what we believe. If people believe it's not possible to change or not possible to transform, they live as if that's true. Or there's a lot of beliefs about this, and how they're going to be around family, how are they going to go out socially, all of those things. But most of all, how are they going to be true to themselves and allow transformation, which is totally possible. And that's one of the wonderful messages that I want to share.
Beautiful. That brought up so many things, and the belief systems, I think, are like some of the toughest things to deal with, because when you start to question your belief systems, you begin an internal battle with yourself. And whether it be about the waistline or relationships, I'm right and you're wrong. I remember being in a conversation with someone one time where, there was a debate around whether or not there was black and white. In just, it's black and white, there's no difference, and then you get into that being a conversation. When we bring that internally, we create even more internal disorder, right? And disease thrives in the disorder, the internal disorder. So you talk about stress. Stress is an internal movement of disarray that creates or allows bacteria and viruses and disease cells to propagate. And when you look at that, and then you contrast it, right? The black and the white, or the good and the bad, you contrast it with the plant food eating, plant food and water and sleep and, all of these things are the things that help with fighting that internal battle, not only physically, but mentally as well, right? The food that is the good nutrition actually can kill the viruses and the cancer cells and the other disease cells, heart disease. What is heart disease but a buildup of the plaque in the arteries to the heart? And studies decades ago proved that certain foods, when eaten a certain way, could help to, not help to, but actually not only clean out the arteries, but, have people not have to have surgery and really put people on the path of healing that you talked about. And I really appreciate that because there's so much in the belief systems that I know from my own experience, you have to create that conflict with in order to allow the belief system to be reproven. And a lot of times you cannot prove a bad belief system. And once you're trying, just like the good food is not going to allow you to have the bad stuff inside you to win. I'm going to bring it back to healing and balance. One side versus the other. And I'm the eternal optimist. I like to think that good will always win. And, I look at the foods that we eat and the lifestyle we live, water, sleep, all of the environment that we're in, all of those good things against the bad, how we're talking to ourselves, what we say that, I can't exercise, I've never exercised before. Well, that's just an excuse or a belief system that is bad medicine. And how do we begin this process? What are some of the things that you tell clients maybe about starting this healing journey and creating balance that actually if we're in a state where the bad is prominent and the good is not, that balance becomes good being overwhelmingly above in order to knock out the bad, and then we go to a synchronistic type of balance that keeps us in good health, in the things that we say to ourselves being good versus what we've just overcome. How do we do that? How does somebody start on that healing and balance?
So that's a great question, and I want to give you a very depthful answer. So, because a lot comes to mind when you say that. First of all, I think is learning how to be kind to ourselves is a huge piece. How we feel about ourselves, and that needs to be talked about, how we really feel about ourselves. And do we feel and believe that we deserve goodness and healing in our lives? So that becomes part of the conversation. The other thing is one step at a time and not to overwhelm anyone. It's very, very important. And so what'll happen is at the beginning, I often will help people go off dairy, eliminate dairy, which is such a huge benefit to our health. There's so many different difficulties around dairy, being saturated fat, filled with hormones from cows that are kept pregnant, what it does to the animals. The casein there's studies on casein related to increasing cancer risk, breast cancer and prostate cancer and other negative things in the body, congestion. And we not only get congested in our respiratory system, when people are congested, their whole body is congested, like in their tissues. And many people have heard this before, I imagine, but there is no mammal, no animal in the mammal kingdom that drinks the milk of another animal, one, and two, they never have milk again after weaning. But we've been indoctrinated this way. And so people that want and are open to this and want this help, I help them not be deprived and give them right away wonderful, healthy things so that they have the textures and, you know, food experiences that they love without dairy. Because it's not that people are craving something from a cow. They just like the texture, let's say, you know, like almond yogurt is wonderful. You know, there's vegan ice cream that you could make yourself or buy, and there's better and better quality ones coming out. You know, and I say that with, it's very important to have ones that don't have coconut butter and palm oil. And a lot of the vegan foods have those, and more products are coming out where hopefully those will not be there, because those are the only fats, by the way, in the, you know, plant-based kingdom that are saturated fats and really not good for our cholesterol and our arteries and so forth. So, and I want to share with you like deep knowledge of my experience, so I'm adding that. So let's say someone starts eliminating dairy and they have eliminated dairy. That also will affect the waistline for sure. And people then get inspired, and there's a lot of sharing of what you can do and alternative things that are actually become the thing, not an alternative. It's the better thing. And people start to feel freer. And people who snore at night. I've had couples come to me that are having relationship problems related to snoring.
Wow.
And there are people who have sleep apnea that haven't been diagnosed, and that's very important to be tested because it affects our heart and it can affect our energy, and people could be chronically tired. It affects one's partner. And a lot of times, and I'm associating this because when people stop eating dairy, they're eliminating congestion, a lot of congestion, and at least they're further on the road to healing their snoring. And of course, it needs to be evaluated by an appropriate doctor, either an EMT or an ENT, excuse me, or a sleep medicine doc, you know, to really see if someone has sleep apnea. And there are better devices than ever now, but that's a big start to something that affects people on so many levels. Even their hearing or their throat and their tonsils. Like there's so many different things that cutting out dairy helps. So that would be that's the first thing. And then, you know, we go further, adding more health-giving foods, learning, watching videos that I recommend. I have training in plant-based medicine and a number of different sources. So I'm very involved with living it and teaching it, as I'm also a therapist as well. There's another piece that I'd like to add, which is in the EMDR work that I do, which has to do with healing trauma, releasing trauma from the nervous system. And one of the most freeing things that stands for EMDR, if anybody wants to look that up, it's actually amazing kind of psychotherapy that only licensed mental health practitioners can train in. One of the things we look at is negative beliefs that we have about ourselves, about whatever happened to us. So we all have had things happen to us. But then we have what we believe about ourselves about what happened to us. That's where the negative beliefs are. And it's very freeing to ask people, and I write it all down. What are their negative beliefs and triggers to negative inner talk and wounds that have never healed? So when we talk about healing, it's really all connected. And this feeling towards ourselves of realizing that we need and deserve goodness and kindness and compassion, self-compassion and compassion for others. And it starts a journey of being inspired and excited to do better and to put care into how we feed ourselves. If you ask many people what they eat for lunch and how they eat lunch, I've had women say to me, they have said, I run through the kitchen and I just shove something down my throat that's sitting around. That's how they eat lunch. So picture that split screen with someone sitting down and having a beautiful meal that was prepared at some point that was workable to do, and being nourished and it's putting love into your body. Every time we improve and give ourselves something beautiful and honoring body, mind, and spirit. So I always talk about self-honor, self-respect, self-love, and honoring the gifts that we've been given, having an amazing life and body to treat. We choose how we treat that gift that we've been given.
We do. And it's beautiful when you realize that you do deserve the health and the wealth and the self-honoring and eating right. And it's showing up in the things that you do for yourself. And it really is. I don't know how many decades ago, the first time I heard about, put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you can help others. And it was on an airplane. But I tell you, I made the direct connection immediately to all things in life. As a mom, you've got to take care of yourself before your kids will feel like they've really been taken care of. And I think that one of the places that we want to start is in our kitchens. Women typically have been the ones responsible for feeding the household. And a lot of times we, without knowing, make these huge traditional dishes that, although we call them traditional, they've changed because the type of food has changed. Meat that people use today is not like the meat that was grown 40 and 50 years ago. The things that are processed and sold in the stores now are even a lot more processed than they were 30 and 40 years ago. And so when you're thinking about moms, those of us who cook for ourselves or for others as well, when you think about plant-based living and cooking and eating these dishes, you see these wonderful dishes that are bowls of this, and they're all of this type of everything, it's 10 different things. And a lot of people look at that and say, oh my God, that's daunting. How do you do that? I'm a mashed potatoes and gravy and a steak and maybe some green beans on the plate, and that's it. And today, when you look at what it looks like to do healthy cooking, no oil, no salt, oil, or sugar, it has a different sense than what most people think about because of what they're used to. How do we do this in this space of cooking these amazing meals? Does it take an hour? to prep and do an amazing plant-based meal? Or is there a way to do something simple and still really nutritious and tasty? For those who don't know, help us understand that aspect of being in the kitchen.
Okay, well, I happen to love that aspect, and I work many long hours, so maybe I'm also a good example in that I do it in not a lot of time, but it is being prepared. And so if you have resources like, for example, let's talk about chickpeas, garbanzo beans. I happen to like I soak them and I cook them, let's say on a Sunday night. And I have this very good source for, let's say, a quick meal the next day. And maybe there's also a whole grain like brown rice or quinoa, and there's vegetables that are cut up. You could make a bowl, and with tahini sauce, or let's say there's a tahini sauce. You could take a bowl, take some of all of these things I just mentioned, chopping up some fresh vegetables that just take a couple of minutes, and a whole bunch of greens with a delicious sauce, and you have this beautiful bowl. There are many videos about this. There are many instructors people can learn. And I always say to people, just add more plant-based meals. Just increase the amount of plant-based meals. And find the ones you love. And keep them in a book, or keep them somewhere in your computer so that you can, experiment with it and then go back to something you loved. And as people find what they love, they create new neurons. They create new possibilities that they didn't know they could ever have or make or taste. And it really opens up a door to being in this healing mode and being excited to find new things that are interesting, because many people are very bored by what they're eating, before they learn this. And they're always looking for something because then they're bored with it. This is like the least boring way to eat, because you could have a different dish every day of the year. There are times when in cooking myself, and I happen to enjoy that and love that, not everyone does, but I will at certain times make more involved recipes. But there's always a way to freeze, like if you made a beautiful pot of soup, you freeze some of it. So you don't have to cook every day. You can take out the soup and, heat it up and have a salad with it. There's ways to extend things, make extra, I made lentil burgers recently, and I had a whole bunch now in the freezer. So you can just take them out and pop them in the, oven and heat them up. So it is learning a process of preparation that doesn't take all your time and will help your whole body. And the waistline piece is like a metaphor. I feel like the waistline we're talking about today is a metaphor for body, mind, soul, emotional healing, and metabolic healing. Because when people have extra, let's say adipose around the middle, which we all know makes people unhappy, on one hand, emotionally unhappy, and people are struggling, but it is metabolically a real concern health-wise. There's something called insulin resistance. It can increase our risk for diabetes, and there's a lot of metabolic issues around that. So it's not just, our visual and our feeling of, how it feels to have that, but it's really so incredibly important for our health to transform this. Of course, exercise is very important, but it isn't the whole answer. Many people think they just have to exercise more. It's also stress management. And, stress is an interesting thing. And I've done a lot of study on the area of stress. And there's someone the person who created the name of stress, coined the name. His name is Hans Selye. And he, you know, he is the first person who created that term, stress. And there is positive stress and negative stress. So how we manage negative stress is hugely important. People do a lot of stress eating to relieve their stress, which then has a boomerang effect, because then they say to themselves, why did you do that? I shouldn't have done that. Then they're beating themselves up for that. But they really needed relief from their stress. And so there's a lot of self-care involved with, let's say, massage, different kinds of exercise, Tai Chi, things you could do at home, yoga, breathing, things that don't have to cost anything to do. Taking walks in nature, nature bathing, which means being around all the green, beautiful trees, walking on sand, earthing. There's many ways, listening to healing music and watching happy movies, movies that aren't traumatic on top of all the trauma in the world. You know, that, let's say, feel-good movies have their place. And finding meaning and purpose is just huge in our livelihoods, in our relationships, and in what our meaning and purpose is changes over time also. And we reinvent ourselves. And we need to, like when people retire, I always say to people, retire into something you have passion about, whatever you're going to be doing, making a difference in the world, knowing that you can help in some way and be part of the solution and not part of the problem and your own problem. And it's freeing. It's freedom. It's freedom to eat well, not be in conflict with what you're eating. And what I'm referring to right now is when people say to me, they feel bad eating meat. They do feel upset about it. They don't want to hurt animals, but they push that away, push that out of their minds. And then they go ahead because they're in conflict and they don't know how to replace it and be satisfied and think that everything on their plate is going to make them feel good and satisfied and healthy. It's hard. That's the change of mindset. But there are many people who are in conflict over this, who want to learn and would be thrilled to learn this. So they have the freedom, and it's a joy and freedom to not be in conflict or disconnect with oneself. And I think I shared in a talk that, you know, I previously did that you were at, and you were helping to facilitate speakers at a conference. And I talked about dissolving when my disconnect dissolving our disconnect, and becoming in tune and in alignment with ourselves and our heart and soul. Because, you know, when we push away something that we're conflicted about, it's like we have to cut off from ourselves. And what healing is about is owning what we need to own and learning how to face it, how to heal it, how to accept it, and do it one step at a time. And that includes addiction therapy. And by the way, I work with addictions. And that is, you know, great saying from 12-step recovery programs, many great sayings, is one step at a time, doing the serenity prayer, which is beautiful. And if we take the serenity prayer seriously, it's very, very helpful. You know, and learning what we can change, how we can heal, how we can be a healing force for other people, being a light without being forceful or oppressive to other people. And I'm very careful with that. I mean, in terms of wanting to be very respectful and sensitive to what other people want to hear, what they're open to hearing, and what they don't want to hear. And they have a right to that choice. And I respect that deeply.
You just brought up so many things that make me want to ask so many more questions, but we are about to wind up now, and I
Yes.
wanted to ask you as we're closing our session today, and we'll have to do this again so that we can get into some of the other deep pieces of this conversation. But is there something that you'd like to leave our audience, that piece of wisdom, that next step, that next thought? What would you like to share with our audience?
Okay, thank you for that wonderful question. So, healing and hope is possible. Healing is possible. It's really important. Reaching out for help and support is a sign of strength and courage. When people call me, I really admire and acknowledge them for what the courage it takes to reach out and not be alone with what someone is suffering about, because healing is possible and new doors opening and new windows of realizations are possible. And sometimes we do need other people and input from other people. It's creating a safe space for ourselves and reaching out for that when we need help. Finding our meaning and purpose is deeply important and gives life meaning, and making a difference and choosing healthy people to be around, and people who are respectful and loving and compassionate, and healing creating healthy boundaries. That's a very important piece of wisdom. And we didn't mention that particular word, but it's such a vital part, and a vital part of my work. It's like, what are healthy boundaries? And I'd love to do this again, because I think that in itself would be a great topic, because many people, as they're changing their eating, and then they go somewhere and someone is pushing them, and they feel they don't know how to deal with it. And healthy boundaries with relationships, with food, with how we self-honor, self-respect, and treating ourselves well, which then will lead to people treating us well, because we go to that, and we have healthy boundaries if that's not the case. So those are a few of the things that are so important that I'd love to share. And most of all, that healing is possible in ways that a lot of people don't know is possible. And it's very deeply true and important to know that. And in a world where there's a lot of tumultuous stuff, that if we connect to the light, our own light, and the light that is available in the world, that has always been there and always will be there, we can grow in our wisdom. Overcome adversity and grow in our wisdom is possible.
Thank you so much. Wow. Definitely words of wisdom to take with us today. Thank you, Dr. Marla. And to our audience, Dr. Marla's contact information, her website will be posted below this video so that you can see what she's up to. I didn't mention she's a speaker and an author, and she's got a book. You'll find out some about that. And she's working on another, so stay tuned, because the profound and deep wisdom that comes from her is something that, in all honesty, is what we need to hear more of. So thank you, Dr. Marla. I so appreciate you for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much, Phelan, and all the beautiful work you do and make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So everyone, post your comments below. Let us know that you heard us, you took away what you took away from this, and join us next week for another conversation on Health, Wisdom, and Wealth Show. Thanks for joining us, and remember, until next time, be well, be loved, and make a bigger positive impact in your world. Bye for now.